So I believe we are up to the two dots on Ayin Ches Amid Beis. So this is a continuation from the Mishnah on the previous plot, right? We have the next few Mishnayos are all variations on this Mishnah, where someone hired a donkey driver to go to take him to transport things in the mountains, and he did in the Bebeka, or vice versa. Depending on what the agreement was, we said it's going to be Chayiv Pater.
I'm sorry, where did you say you're starting from?
We're on Ayin Chesam and Beis, but I'm just referencing the Mishnah on Chesam and Aleph. The end of the Mishnah was Hasoicher Sachamor v'Hivrika Oishenasas and Garia. Is someone hired a donkey? You rented a donkey, like the same way you or I would rent a car. The Hivrika, and the Chamor was Hivrika. The Gemara is going to bring now machlekes about what exactly Hivrika is. Oishenasas and Garia, or it was impounded by the government. So both of these things, the mashmais of the Mishnah is that these are things that are not permanent. The owner of the chamar can tell the renter that it's your bad luck. I gave you a chamar. The chamar is still there, and you have to. It's reduced in use, but it's still usable, and that's your tough luck. But if the animal is gone, if it died, or it's unable to work, then the owner can't say, this is the useless animal. Now the Gemara is going to talk about, first of all, what is Hivrika? The Gemara says, by us, we learned that it means it got blinded. Rava says it got, Rashi teaches Avzakas, that it got infested with worms. So the animal became a shtika lame from a worm infestation. Avzakas means an infestation. The Gemara brings in a case, Hahuda Amalahu. It was a person who, it seems he was watching over the king's storehouses. And he told the king, and some of these stores were ruined. And this person said, he said that there was an infestation in the Melech's possessions. What did this infestation ruin? Did it ruin Tli Kesef, meaning silver-colored begadim, like linen, or Tli Zav, or like red begadim, which are made out of wool? So some say he said there was an infestation. The moths came and ate the linen kalim, the linen begadim, and they killed him because everyone knows that moths don't attack linen. So they knew that he was lying, and he just ruined them himself. Some people say that he answered, he was talking about woolen begadim, and that taka makes sense that they would get ruined, and therefore they let him go. But in any case, Shavzakas is either that the animal got blinded or it got infested, and it's not as effective as it once was. The owner can say Haresh al Kalafaneh. The second example of where the owner can say the person who is who owns the chamar, who rented it out, he could say it was impounded. If the military, swept it up, they said we need some donkeys. We're taking your donkey. And the renter goes back to the guy who rented him. The guy who rented him says, I'm sorry, just wait. You'll get it back soon, and this is your tough luck. Amar Rav. So Rav says, this is only an angaria that it's a temporary angaria. They took it for a couple of days. They needed it to do work, to dig ditches, to do military stuff. But if the donkey was taken permanently, then it's the same thing as if the animal died. The second case of the Mishnah, where it said if it died or got broken conclusively, then the owner has to replace the rented mule. So the same thing if it was permanently conscripted. Ushmul Amar, Shmuel says, Bein Angarya Chezeres, Bein Angarya Sheina Chezeres. He says the Mishnah did not make a distinction. So in the Mishnah means both cases, whether it's a permanent conscription or not. However, in B'derech Halicha Nitla, Oimaloi Hareshel Cholofanecha. So then why did the Mishnah say Oimaloi Hareshel Cholofanecha? He understands it to mean that if the person with the donkey is traveling in the same direction of the army, but the army, even when they take it permanently, even if they didn't just take it for the afternoon, they took it permanently. But what they'll eventually do is they'll wear out the animal, they get tired of dealing with it, and they'll just let it go after a couple of days. So if you're traveling in the same direction, if the renter is traveling in the same direction, he'll be able to get it back, even though they took it permanently. It's only in theory permanently, but practically speaking, they'll just release it. Now, obviously, this guy can't follow along with the army just to get back his donkey. But if he happens to be traveling in that direction, then the owner can say Hareshel Cholofanecha because you can recover it anyway. But if not, he has to provide him with a new one. Meisvei. We have a brisa that says someone rented a chamor, the vrika, like we said, it either got blind or lame. Oishen tatasa, or the animal went crazy, it got rabid, and it became unable to work. I mean, it's not unable to work, but it's difficult to work. To tell him, the owner could say, listen, you have still a usable animal. Mesa Oishinasas and Gaia, Chayiv Lahamid Loy Chamor. Bryson says, if the animal died or that it was conscripted, you have to provide a new chamor. So Bishlam Rav like Kasha. According to Rav, it's a simple explanation why this brisa says that by Angaria you have to replace it. And our Mishnah said by Angaria where it's conscripted Harishal Cholofanecha. Kam Bangaria Chezeres, Kam Bangaria Shein Chezeres. He'll make the distinction between whether it's a conscription that's intended just for a short amount of time or a permanent for the time being conscription. Elo Shmuel Kasha. But according to Shmuel says even if it's a permanent conscription, you could still say Hareshel Cholofanecha. Why are we saying over here that he has to provide, the owner has to provide a new mule? There's an obvious answer that even Shmuel said it's the only reason why it's Hareshel Lifonecha by an Angaria She'ein Chezeres, permanent Angaria, is because he has the ability, if he's going the same direction, that he could take it back. But what happens if he's not? Then the din is that the owner has to provide a new one. So why can't you say that that's what that price is referring to? Gemara says that's not possible. Tani Sefer. The Mishnah says b'shem Reb Shimon Elazar, he makes that chiluk. It says that this is only that which we say that you have to return it. That's only if it's shaloi. Well, we'll see exactly what that means. But the fact that Shimon Elazar is being mechalek, Vices the Tanakama says, regardless of whether he's going the same derech, even if he was going the same derech, the owner is going to have to replace it. So l'chayra, it's not like Rav. I'm sorry, not like Shmuel. Amalach Shmuel. Shmuel says no. Lami ikar Reb Shimon Elazar the koy kavasi. Right, Yenachanami. The Tanakama doesn't hold. Reb Shimon Elazar does hold that nafkamina. So I'll tell you that there is a nafkamina between if they're going the same direction. It means even if it's a Angaria She'ein Chezeres, if it's going to be that the owner is going that direction, then the balabayas, the owner does not have to replace it. Another explanation. Cooler Reb Shimon Elazar. Reb Shimon Elazar in that brisa was not coming to be chaylik. It means it's not that the Tanakam holds there's no difference between whether he was going the same direction, the renter was going the same direction as the army. Which is what we said in the Brisa. The Rebbe Shimon Elazar is coming to explain the case in the Mishnah. He's saying that which we said before, that's only where they're not going in the same direction, then the owner has to replace it. Shimon Elazar explains the Tanakama, or it's not really explains, he is the Tanakama, he's explaining that sheet. So we stick in that middle part that is Divrei Reb Shimon Elazar, and then Reb Shimon Elazar, what we see in our brayso, so what we brought down is just the summation of what Reb Shimon Elazar holds. Can we say that that brayso is going according to Reb Shimon Elazar V'Aktani Reisha? But there's a earlier part of the brayso. If the animal, like we said, is unable to work so well because it's blind or it's lost its faculties, the owner can tell the renter it's your problem since it's not fully incapacitated, just a partial incapacitation, which is ba'inus. He can say hareshel chalaf manecha. If someone rented a chamar to ride on it, and it became blind or it became unstable, he says you have to fully replace it. So it's not like the Bryson. Rav Shimon Elazar clearly disagrees with the Tan. He's not holding like the Tanakama because not on the din that we said about Angaria, but the other din that the Tanakama said, he paskins not like that. Amarav Barav Huna Lirka V'Lea Shani. Barav Huna answers no. That Bryson could really be Rav Shimon ben Elazar l'Shitasei. But that which it said over there in the Brisa, that if it was Nishtatza Hivrika, that it's Hareshel Chal Vanecha, that's not talking about where a person hired it Lirkoi Valeh, like this later sheet of Rav Shimon Elazar says. It's talking about where the Brisa we brought earlier is talking about where he hired the Chamar to use to carry burdens. So then its use is not as useful as it was, but it's still able to be used. But if you hire an animal to ride on it, if it's blind or if it's somewhat unable to walk well, that's useless because the person who's riding doesn't want to get thrown off. So for packages, it's a partial incapacitation. But when it was hard to be used for the owner, for the renter to ride on it, it's a total bittul of the use of the animal. It's totally unable to be used, and therefore the owner has to replace it. Amar Papa, Papa says, just be aware that just like we said, an animal that's rented to be ridden on is useless if it becomes nishtatis, if it becomes crazy, or if it became blind. The same thing would if you rented it to carry fragile cargo, because the same thing, if the animal is not steady, it will drop the fragile cargo and break it. So therefore, it's useless. Amarav. Nude. Someone who rented a chamor to ride on it, and the animal died halfway there. The person who rented the animal has to pay half of the rent to go to wherever he reached with the animal. And all he has is tarumas on the owner that he gave him an animal that died, but he can't get any compensation. All he gets is that he gets what he got out of the animal. That's it.
But he's getting this half. He is getting.
But the renter has tarumas on the owner. You gave me a shvach animal that died, and I didn't end up getting to what I had. So what's the case? If it's possible for this renter to find another animal, he paid half of the rental, and I was going to find someone else that another animal to take him the rest of the way. Terumas mayavidite. What terumas does he have? He didn't lose anything. He just gets another animal. And if he can't find another animal to rent, what does he have to pay for the first half? He didn't get to where he had to go. Why is he paying half of the rental for something that didn't accomplish what he needed to accomplish? Really, it's talking about where he can't find another donkey. So we asked, if that's the case, why does he have to pay at all? The owner says to the renter, listen, if you would have want to go to this halfway point that you reached, you would have had to pay a rent for that. So now you still have to pay. So let's see the Taisus on this, because it's very hard to understand. Like, what was the Havamin and what was the Maskana? Sagt the Gemara, Tem, the Hashnamiyah the Lavad Hachaboy Lamesi, Lamayitin Leschar. If that wasn't his intention, right? If he intended to go to Chicago and he only made it to Pennsylvania. He's going from New York to Chicago and he only made it to Pennsylvania. No interest to go to Pennsylvania. So why should he have to pay for that? If that So about when you could hire someone else, but it just could be more expensive. However, it's not like what we were talking about before, where the price of an animal went up and you have to hire someone for more. Over here, the owner does not have to make up to the renter the fact that he has to hire someone for more, because it's a total onus. It's not his responsibility to make up the loss of the renter, but the renter does get benefits from the fact that he got this far. So Gemara, Hechidan, what's this case that we just said that the renter pays half the amount for however far he got before the animal died, and the issue of terms. If we're talking about, well, the owner didn't say, it's not like our car rentals where you go beforehand and you make a reservation and you say, I want to get a Nissan Altima for $45 a day. He just said, I want a donkey. I don't care which donkey, provide me a donkey to get from here to there. If that's the case, so there's no donkey. So how can the owner say, it's your tough luck? You promised to give me a donkey. I didn't say a specific donkey, so you have to replace the donkey that died. It's your, the renter could tell him, there's no donkey. You said a donkey, you said a stam donkey, so I don't care if this one died. You obligated yourself to provide a donkey for the whole way. So but if he said, listen, I want to hire Bessie from you to take me from New York to Chicago, likach yikach. More says, then that animal is now meshubed to help the Ruvain is the one that is the renter, let's say. It's meshubed to help Ruvain get the animal, to get him to convey Ruvain from New York to Chicago. In the middle, in Pennsylvania, Bessie died. So the Gemara says, let Ruvain sell the remains of Bessie and buy a shvacha animal in its place. So the Gemara says, listen, I don't understand this whole Gemara. I don't know what possible use a dead donkey is. It's no one's eating it. Really, you're going to feed it to dogs? Like, whoa. But the Gemara says, listen, certainly there's not going to be enough money in the dead Bessie to buy a whole new donkey to take him the rest of the way. So tomorrow.
Why buy? You just rent. He just use a rent.
So the Gemara says, in Yesh B'Damel Liskar Yiskar. The Gemara says, why do you have to buy a new one? Why don't you just rent one with the remains of the dead donkey? And I think Taisva says the reason now we don't answer because there's not enough money, because it's certain that the dead donkey will be provide enough money to rent a new donkey. Now, again, like I said, I'm just befuddled by the practicalities of what possible money you can get for a dead donkey. I guess so. Zok Gemara, and that Rashi Taisa says it's pasha that you'll have enough money from selling. So Zok Gemara, why can't you? So like Rafal asked, Gemara asked, why can't you take the money and rent another donkey instead? Since this animal was meshubed to help the renter get from point A to point B. But Gemara Rav holds that although the animal is meshubed to help the renter get from where he's going to where he has to go, he cannot consume the principle of the owner. It means if like we originally suggested, you would sell it and buy another animal. So now the owner has a different animal in place of his original animal. He hasn't lost any principle. It's going to be a less valuable animal because he sold a dead animal and bought a live one, but you're preserving his capital for the future. But if you just use it for rental, then the owner is going to be out. You're going to get to Chicago, and then there's not going to be anything left. You used all the money to pay for a rental. To itma, someone who rented a chamar and it died. Rav says you can buy another donkey with the money of the carcass, but you can't rent. Shmuel says you can even rent with that money. But my commitment, what's a machlokes? Rav savar lemachlin and kana. Shmuel savar machlin and kana. This is the machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Rav holds you cannot consume the principle, and Shmuel says no. If the animal is meshubed to get him from one place to the other, whatever you have to do, that's what you do to get it there. Masonry, fact Gemara. This Gemara is going back on the what is it called? Mashkanta Desura. You look at Rashi on the side, he says, Yavasha Ilan, Misha Mishkan Ilan Chaver. Reuven borrowed from Shimon, and he gave an Ilan, a tree, as a mashkan to Shimon. Kihani Mashkanta Desura, but he did it in the format of Surah. Like we said before, if we learned earlier, if Shimon, while he's holding this mashkan, would get the paris of the tree, that would be an obvious ribis problem. That at the end, when Reuven pays back the money, Shimon consumed the paris of the tree. So the way to avoid that is to say this lashon: the kasvi b'mishlam shnia ilan, with the payments from this tree, meaning they would designate every year this tree, $50 of this tree, of the produce from this tree is going to go toward paying off the debt. And you'll do with that. Let's say the tree is worth $1,000. So over 20 years, you're going to pay back $50 a year. It's going to pay back the loan. So by formatting in this way, what you essentially have is that Reuven sold his tree to Shimon for 20 years. That the tree belongs to him, and he gets $50 worth of value from the payers, even though Shimon is actually getting much more. But like we said before, that's not considered ribis because you didn't format it as a loan with ribis, but rather you formatted it as a sale where he's entitled to get the sale of the payers for a certain amount of money each year. So what happened in that case where you had this mashkanta desura on a tree, and the tree dried out, it withered, or nixas, or got chopped down by mistake. So there's no tree anymore. You just have a pile of firewood. And Shimon is still owed money, so he still feels he owns the tree, and he wants to get his other $1,000 that he's owed, his other $500. So neither one of them can take the firewood and consume it, because Reuven can't do it because currently under the Mashkanta Desura, it's treated as if it's owned by Shimon. And Shimon can't use it up because it really belongs to Reuven. It's Reuven's tree. As soon as he pays back the loan, it's going to revert to Reuven. Kesad Yasa. So what do? You lakach by karka. You take the tree and you buy land. And in the meantime, Shimon can eat paris of this karka until in the place of the paris of the tree that he was supposed to get. So the Gemara, how could you suggest such a thing that you're going to sell the the tree for karka. This land, this karka that you bought with the wood of the tree, when Yovel is going to come, that land is going to go back to whoever the owner is, a third party. It's going to go back to Levi. And now Ruvain is going to be left with nothing. And you machal yakana. So how can we say that according to Rav lo machal yakana? But we see from this price that you can't sell firewood, even though it's going to and buy with the karka, which will eventually go back to the owner of the karka, and therefore it will be machal yakana. There won't be anything left of it. We're talking about where you buy the land for 60 years. And that when you buy land for 60 years, Yovel does not operate to end the ownership. It doesn't go back to the seller by Yovel. It doesn't go back until 60 years are up. If someone sells a sada for 60 years, doesn't go back with Yovel. You can't sell a land permanently. It's only something that there's no Yovel, it's nitzmetzes, meaning that there was no definition that there's a Yovel inside of it. So when Yovel comes, it takes it away. But Yesham Shem Yovel, if the Yovel is included in the term that you made, so if you do it over 60 years, so that includes a Yovel. So Yovel does not take it away. This, since that comes to exclude this case of 60 years, that since it does, even though it doesn't have a Shem Yovel, it's still not going to be. It's not going to be coming away. It's not going to be taken away from the purchaser when Yovel comes. That means it wouldn't. This is something that has an end date of when if someone buys something permanently, then Yovel comes and knocks it off. But if you put an end date on it, even though that end date extends past Yovel, that's going to be excluded, and Yovel is not going to take it away. So, Gemara, what does this help? The whole reason why we said Yovel, well, the problem with Yovel was that Yovel is going to take it away. So therefore, you'd be Machal Yakana. So we say, no, we have a suggestion. Yovel only takes away if you don't have an end date. But now when the end date of Shishim Shana comes, it's still going to be taken away. So it's still Machal Yakana. So how does it help to suggest that the firewood should be sold in exchange for karka that's going to be taken away from Ruvain? Eventually, it's going to go back to Ruvain. 60 years obviously extends past the period of the loan, but eventually it's going to get taken away from him at the end of the term. So therefore, that's not going to answer. We can't answer this teretz of Yovel. We're talking about when Yovel is not noyeg, so therefore it's not machal yikanim when you sell it for karka. Eventually, Ruvain will get to keep that karka because Yovel won't take it away. And I'll prove it to you. If you say we're talking about when Yovel is noyeg, machlin and karna, and therefore the keren will go away because of the Yovel. So what is the suggestion that you should sell it and buy karka, which will eventually be consumed, will be taken away from the owner by Yovel? Let's just give him the firewood and let him take it. Meaning, you have the same problem with if at the end it's getting consumed. What if at the end it's going to come back? What is the milo of doing it, of selling it, buying karka, which is eventually going to get consumed and it's not going to be available to Ruvain? Let him just have the firewood and use that. So what are you gaining? Let the lender, instead of getting karka, which is going to be taken away from Ruvain, let him just go straight forward, take the straightforward path, take the firewood itself and use it up. So Gemara, no. Imishum ha leikash. Zimnin the shalmu shnei mashkanta mekami yoyim. Says no. There could be different graduations in machal yikarna. There's one machal yikarna which is immediate, where you get if he takes the firewood and consumes it immediately. There's another machal yikarna where in the meantime he buys a karka and it goes back to Ruvain, and eventually maybe Ruvain's going to lose it when the original owner of the land of that karka comes and gets it. But in the meantime, the mashkin is going to be over, and Reuven will get some use from this karka before it's taken away. Or maybe even if the term of the loan doesn't finish before Yovel, maybe Reuven will pay up his loan and get use of this karka, because he'll get back his mashkin and he'll get the karka for a few years. So it's not as definitive a machal yakarna as taking the firewood directly and burning it up. So that's not a tiny. Another din. This is these gemaras are and these mishnayos are all a little bit chopped up with different sugyas. Really on the same sugya generally, but different examples. Tanraban hasaycher asasvinu. Someone who rented a ship. He was taking the ship from, let's see, he was going from New York to Fort Lauderdale, and he stopped on the way at Norfolk, Virginia. They stopped at Norfolk with all his schayr on it, and the ship sank at halfway. He's the owner, and the person who rented it still has to get to Fort Lauderdale. If the renter, the soicher, already had paid what he was required to pay to the owner, he can't get it back. He's stuck. He's stuck in it where he is, and he has to figure out how to get to Fort Lauderdale. But if he didn't give him lo yitin, he shouldn't give. So basically, ha'moitzi mechaveri olav araya in this case. So what's going to be the case? So there's two different ways that a person can structure. There's two different factors, and each one could be structured one or two ways. Like we said before, let's say Reuven is the renter and Shimon is the owner. Reuven could have said to Shimon, I want to rent a boat to go from New York to Fort Lauderdale. Or he could say, I want to rent the USS Constitution that you have. I want to rent that boat to take me from New York to Fort Lauderdale. And there's also, Reuven could have said, I want to rent the boat, either whichever one it is, either a boat or this boat. He could have said, I want to rent it to take some wine. I want to bring some barrels of wine with me. Or he could say, I have 100 barrels of Kedem Matuk Soft that I want to take with me. These vintage bottles of wine, specific barrels, that's what I want to take with me. So Dr. Mark, if Reuven had designated a particular sfina, the yain stam, and he didn't say which wine it was that he wanted to take. So now when it's sunk halfway, so the owner is not fulfilling his responsibility. He said, you're going to take this particular namely, the Gemara is going to say, am I little? Namely, havli svinasa da no ma'isina cham. He could say, you were obligated yourself to take this boat and to allow me to take this boat all the way to Fort Lauderdale. But you're not fulfilling your side of the cheshbon. That boat is not available because it's sunk. And as far as me, I'm prepared. Even though my wine sunk, I just said chamra stam, so I'll get new wine and I'll put it on. So I am prepared to fulfill what I said, and you're not prepared to fulfill what you said. So why would we say that the owner, Shimon, could tell Reuven, don't get your what you paid for this for the svina bet, the schius. Ella b'svina stam v'yayin zeh. So you'll say the other way around, that Shimon had obligated himself to take stam svina to make the trip from New York to Florida, the yayin zeh, and Reuven had said, I'm sorry, I read wrong. Ella b'svina stam v'yayin zeh, right. Did I skip something?
No.
Yeah, Ella b'svina stam v'yayin zeh, and Reuven had said this specific yayin. So therefore, Reuven's yayin is on the bottom of the ocean. He has no yayin to take. So he can't go to Shimon and say, I want you to fulfill your part of the bargain. Shimon says, I'm prepared. I'll go get another boat and I'll still be fulfilling my bargain. But you don't have anything for me to take because it's on the bottom of the ocean. Why shouldn't, in that case, why shouldn't Reuven be obligated to fulfill what he said he's going to do? Namely, Shimon could say to him, you show up with your wine that's on the bottom of the ocean, and I'll bring in a different boat because I didn't say which boat. So Amar Papa, Ella b'svina zu v'yayin zeh. The Papa says the only case you're going to find this is with this svina and this yayin, where they're both obligating them specifically. So neither of them can do what they promised. So in that case, we're going to say it's going to depend on who's the hamaitzi mechavere. If the fee was already paid, and now Reuven is trying to say, "Give me back my fee," Shimon will say to him, "I'm not going to give it back. You have to prove you're not fulfilling your part." It basically is going to throw the onus. It's not really hamaitzi mechavere l'varayah. It's just that when Reuven says, "Give me back my money," Shimon says, "Listen, you can't ask me to give back money because you're not prepared to go forward with the deal anyway because your wine sunk." And if the other way around, if he hadn't been paid, if Shimon had not yet been paid, he won't be able to get from Reuven because Reuven will say, "Your ship is not available to go." Avo b'svina stam b'yayin stam. If both of them would said stam, so then both of them really could continue cholkin. In that case, we would say you divide it up; it would be half and half. Tanaraban. Hasoicher es hasvina, someone who rented a ship, uparkalo b'chatzi hader, and he unloaded it halfway. I mean, they made a stop in Virginia, and he unloaded the contents of the ship. Even though it cost $1,000 to go all the way to Florida and only cost $500 to go to Virginia, the Reuven, who was the renter, can stop in the middle, and he won't, and he only pays half, and Shimon only has terumas. I'm sorry. Yeah, if he could find someone else to rent the boat to go to continue the trip, what is the terumas? He's going to get made whole. He'll get another $500 for the rest of the trip. So he'll be able to rent it. And if he can't find someone else to rent it, it should be Reuven's fault. Reuven decided to stop in the middle. So he's leaving the boat owner stranded. He should have to pay the full amount. We're talking about where he can't find someone else to rent. What is tarumas? Because it's going to cause an extra loading and unloading, and each loading and unloading causes damage to the boat. It's wear and tear on the boat. So if it causes wear and tear on the boat that he hadn't contracted at the beginning, he wasn't expecting to have this wear and tear when he made the deal with Reuven to go all the way from New York to Florida without a second loading and unloading. It should be real money. He's causing extra wear and tear. Minus legabe, he should be able to get compensated. Ella, my pirka. So Gemara says the case is entirely different than what we had said. My pirka means the parka l'teune begave. It's talking about where the renter, in the middle of the trip, was pyric of some other stuff that he had. He unloaded from a different boat and put it onto this boat. So he added additional weight and additional burden on the boat. So Gemara Elamai Tarumas. We're talking about obviously where he had the right to put as much as he wanted on it. So what difference does it make to the owner if he added it in New York or he added it in later? So Gemara Mishum Dinin Mishum Shina Daita, because the owner, the guy showed up in New York and he with a 18-wheeler full of stuff, and the ship owner looked at it and he said, okay, I'll take it to New York, I'll take it to Florida for you. And he wasn't aware that there was anything else. He said you can take whatever you want, but he saw this is all you're putting on. And now all of a sudden the guy pops up with extra stuff. It's extra weight, it's going to take longer. So the Gemara, Elamai Tarumas, what's the problem with that, if that was the agreement? So Mishum Shini Daita, either, so like we said, Rashi says that it would have taken, it's going to take longer because it's going to be heavier. Inami, Ashli Yisera. Or Rashi has a whole complicated explanation that if it's going to weigh more, he's going to have to, these ships were not ocean-going ships. They were really going in rivers. I should have said that example. So they would schlep them on ropes in the middle of the river or near near the coast or near the edge of the river. But if it was heavier, it needed to go deeper, so you needed a longer rope so that it could be extended out into deeper water. So if it's heavier, it costs more in rope. Tanarabban. I just want to, I don't know if Menachem and Rafal, you were here last night, but we made up, we're going to learn a little extra today. We covered the Memorial Day. We covered the people who gave their lives in France to what do you call it, to liberate the concentration camps. So now I'm really obligating you morally. Tanarabban. Hasayker is a chamor lerkavala. Someone who rented a chamor, meaning here it's not really rented, because I guess the way it worked was the owner of the chamor would walk in front of it, leading it. So Seicher is chamor lerkavala. So he was going to get a ride on the chamor. Seicher, the renter, maniachalek susoi v'lagnusoi muzoinish shel oisa hadar. The Seicher was allowed to take along luggage. It's very much like our airplanes today. He was very precisely limited in how much luggage he could take. So he could take along his clothing and his what do you call it? His drinks and his food for however long the trip is. If it's going to take a week, he could take a week's change of clothing and food and water. But more than that, the owner of the donkey could say, it's too much weight, it's going to cause damage to my donkey. Chamar, the owner of the donkey, he's going to be leading the donkey, he's going to have to feed the donkey, so he puts on its iron, the barley for the animal to eat, the tevin and hay, and however, whatever food he needs for that day. So he should have what to eat. But more than that, the renter can say, I'm not masking, because it's going to slow down. The more you put on, the more it's going to slow me down. So tomorrow, if it's a place where you can get stuff, let the owner of the donkey also say, why do you have to bring a whole week's worth of provisions to the renter? You say, why do you have to bring a whole week? Why don't you stop by the gas station each day, just like I'm going to be doing, and get what you need? And if he can't get, why can't the owner of the donkey take what he needs for the whole week? He's obviously not going to have enough. The donkey and he are going to die after one day because they're not going to be able to buy anything. So basically the question is, why is there a distinction between the owner of the donkey, that he only takes one day's provisions, and the renter can take a week? Where you can get, you could put yourself out and find what to buy. The guy, the livery driver, the guy leading the chamar, that's part of his job. He's supposed to fend for himself, and he'll run around and get something to eat each day. So he takes along the first days, so he should have what to eat that day as they're traveling. But then after that, he has to go find for every new day. That's not the deal. I'm paying for a luxury trip. I want to not have to be busy going to find food every place we stop. Someone who rents a donkey to ride on it. For a man to ride on it. A woman cannot ride in his place. As Rashi says, no, Rashi doesn't say it. But the idea is that a woman, I think, were less experienced at riding. So therefore, it was harder on the animal. But on the other hand, Isha Roichavala, like Tikavala Isha Roichavala Ish. But if you hire it for a woman, a man can ride on it because men are more adept at riding. They're not gonna be as heavy on the animal. The Isha Beng Dailo Beng Tana. When you say it, if you rented it for an Isha, it doesn't make a difference how big she is. Afilu Mubaris. And it's not going to be, you're not going to say, the owner of the donkey can't say, I was only going to hire it for a regular woman, but not a big woman or not even a Mubaris woman. Afilu Menika. And even if she's nursing, meaning even together with a baby, she's allowed to go. So Hashda Menika Amrit Mubaris Mibaya. Now, if you're saying Menika can go on it, what do you have to say Mubaris? Certainly, a baby that was born weighs more than a baby that's before it's born. So what do you have to tell me all these things? Amar Papa Mubaris Menika Kama. It's saying even if she's both Mubaris and Menika, once you say you're hiring her for a woman, there's no limit to the weight. This is like a big thing on planes also now, right? They're talking about you have to take 2 seats. You have to, they're talking about they want to make surcharges for people who are way more. Amar Abaye Shmamino Benisa Akarsa Takla. That we see from here that by looking at how big the stomach is, that that tells you how much they weigh. So we see that a woman who has a big stomach because she's pregnant, who's mubaris, is going to weigh more than a woman who's stam big. So this is like what we can learn that when it comes to fish, if you see that it has a big stomach, that means it weighs more. L'may nafkamina. What difference does it make to why is that a nafkamina? It's coming to tell you that someone it's relevant. Like I be someone who buys a fish that has a big stomach, it's going to end up weighing more, even though it's not such a big fish, because it's going to be full of a big stomach. It's going to have a bunch of junk that's made up in its belly that's going to cause you to pay more of its weight, even though the value is not as much. Okay, let's at least do one more Mishnah with the Gemara. Someone who rented a cow to plow in the mountain, and instead the renter used it to plow in the valley. So mountains are more rocky than valleys, and therefore it's more likely to break. Im nishbar hakankan, if the plow, the part of the plow that goes into the ground broke, potter. He's potter because he went to a place that's less likely to cause this problem. So the Gemara, Rashi explains this, is talking about a specific case, which the Gemara, but he says it because of the Gemara. So we'll wait till we see the Gemara to get into that. But Bika v'charish bahar, if he did it, he rented to do it in the valley. Instead, the renter used it in the har, which is a worse place as far as damaging the plow. In Nishbar Kankan Chayiv, the renter is going to be Chayiv. Lodush bekitnish v'dosh betfor. If he rented it to thresh beans, which are slippery, and instead he did it on wheat, potter, because it's less likely to do damage. Lodush betfor v'dosh bekitnish chayiv neshach kitnitz machlekas. If he did it if the owner only rented it for wheat and he used it for beans, he's going to be chayiv because, like the Mishnah says, beans are more slippery, so it's more likely to cause damage to the animal. We had talked about in the Mishnah. We talked about where someone rented a cow to plow, and he, instead of doing it in the mountain, he did it on the bik, or vice versa. The Gemara says, what about it? Well, we're not talking about the case of the Mishnah, where the person who rented it to do in the har, and that's where he did it. And then Hitaka used it and it broke. And the Gemara says, it's talking about a case, as we're going to see, where people used to hire workers to actually wield the plow, to be mashkiach on it. So there were two people. One guy would lead the cow, and the other guy would push the plow to the dirt. So the Gemara says, who of those two people, where they were hired workers, is considered to be the negligent one, and there's going to be chai? Amra Papa, the Nakit Parsha Mishal. The Papa says the one who's leading the animals, he has to pay because he led the animal to a place where there are rocks, and that caused the plow to break. The one who's actually holding the plow into the ground. The Hilchas of Nakit Manamasham. We take a say like Ravidi, that's the one who holds the plow. The Duchta Machzeches Gundri, and if it's a place that there's a lot of rocks there, then Travayu Masham. Both of them are going to be chayiv because they should have been extra careful. They should have gone very slowly. They could have avoided it, and it's there. Both of them are reliable. Amar Rabbi Yechon, Hamoicha par lechaver. Someone who sells a par to his friend. Amar parazu nachkanasi, nashkanasi, batonasi, ravtonasi. This para has a lot of defects. First of all, it gores. Second of all, it bites, and it batonasi, and it kicks. Ravtonasi, and it squats on things, like all the different types of Karen that we learned in the beginning, the Toldus of Karen in the first parak of Bava Kama. And the animal only had one of these things. The only thing it did, let's say, was that it gored, but it didn't do any of the other things. V'sanfu bein amumin. This seller was very clever. He says, I'm going to say it has all these mumin, and then the buyer will think he's very clever. He'll say, oh, look, I see it doesn't bite or it doesn't kick. So all these things must not be true. So essentially what the seller was doing was hiding this mum by saying a bunch of extra mumin. He was hiding the mum. It's a mekach tois. He fooled the buyer. The buyer thought, since he saw that it didn't bite, he thought it didn't do anything. Mum zeh mum acher. But if he said, rather than saying a list of 4 different mumin, he said it has a mum of being an achanis and also another unspecified mum. Ein zeh mekach tois. From the fact that the buyer notices that he doesn't have any other mum, that's not enough of a reason for him to suspect that the first mum is not true, since he specified only the one that it actually has. Tanya nami hachi hamoicha shivcha l'chaverit. Someone who sold a maidservant to his friend. She's a shaita, she's nichvesi, she has seizures, mishuemesi, another type of emotional disturbance. And she only had one of these mumen that were mentioned. But some for ben a mumen, he did the same thing, the same way of tricking the purchaser. It's going to mekach tois. The same cheshbon, like you said, of buying a para would be applied to a shifcha. What if What if the woman, this maidservant that he bought, has all of the mummin that were mentioned? That means if she has all these things, could he say, since we know that the halacha is where he says a lot of mummin, and we assume that that's a mekach tois, if it turns out that some of them are not true, he was doing it to trick the buyer. Maybe the buyers now, once we said that's the halacha, they'll always assume whenever there's a long list of things, it's being done to fool them, and he doesn't expect the animal, the shifra to have all these problems. He thinks that it was just a negotiating ploy to get him to think that she doesn't, that he'll see that it doesn't have one of them, and therefore he'll let it go. But he said, I thought that this guy was trying to do that ploy, and she doesn't really have all these things. Amalei Rav Mordechai, l'Ravashi, hachamin mishmei derava, hayibo kolam amulalu ein ze mekach tois. Says no, you overthought the whole situation. You thought that they were trying to fool you because that they said all these things. They were trying to fool you, but you're going to chop them, and it really is not going to have all those problems. You should have just been straightforward. He said that he has all the problems, and she has all of them. That's what you accept. Do you guys want to continue with the next Mishnah or for another?
I have to go now already.
You have to go?
Yeah, but you can continue. I'll listen to the recording if you want.
All
right.
Yeah, we'll do it. It's a complicated thing, so we'll do it tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem, at 6:20. This next one is going to need a little focus. Probably not the best thing to do at the end of an hour.
It's gonna be on Zoom. It's gonna be on Zoom.
No, I'm gonna be in the shul. I'm gonna be in the shul tomorrow.
Okay.
Once my Memorial Day weekend vacation is over. Ready.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Shkayach.
Kol tov, atzlacha.
Take care.